Thanks so much for everyone that is with us tonight. We're going to give folks just another minute or so to log into the webinar. We're excited to share our first webinar of the year with you, and happy 2025.
Are we ready?
We are going to go ahead and get started. So, welcome again, everyone. My name is Mel LeDuc. If you could go to the next slide. So, you're joining the Inclusion Equity Committee tonight, and the majority of the committee tonight, to talk about tips for bold conversations. We know that we've had quite a couple different webinars on how to, relate to others, how to work through difficult conversations, and we think it's time to kind of up our up our skills, especially in our current climate, where sometimes it may be difficult to see eye to eye with the person next to you. So with that, just a couple reminders for our webinar. Please use the Q&A function to ask questions of our panelists. We will have dedicated time at the end to answer questions. If you are having any technical issues, those would go in the chat. So with that, we will start our webinar. Next slide, please.
Okay. We're going to be talking today about bold conversations. I'll be getting to those principles pretty soon, but bolder conversations are the ones you know in advance are going to be difficult. The point here, don't just avoid them. But here are some tips that we hope will help you when you do. As for our run of show, you'll be hearing two bold conversations, one towards the beginning of the presentation, one towards the end. You'll also be hearing about some principles you might want to keep in mind as you're conversing. As you listen to the conversations in particular, be thinking about how these principles may or may not apply. We'll also hear about the insights regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion that can have a significant impact on your conversation, bold or not. All right, here are Suzanne and Karen to present our first conversation.
And I'm sorry. Hey, Sue, did you see what the school board is going to, that the school board is going to remove Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye and Patricia McCormick's book, Sold, from the library?
I sure did. And it's about time. It's all about race and sex. Enough already.
But you've got to feel for the girl in the bluest eye who prays for her eyes to turn blue so that she will be beautiful and be noticed, or in Sold, the 13-year-old girl who is living in poverty in Nepal but content with her life until her stepfather tells her she has to leave home and take a job to support her family, which she thinks will be as a maid, but of course meant she was taken to the city to become a prostitute.
This may all sound good to you, but I think it's forcing our kids to grow up too fast and exposing them to scary ideas.
How can you say that, particularly these days?
Because it's these days that are harming our kids, depriving parents and the community the right to protect them. It's those elite people in the cities that are trying to dictate what our values have to be. You go to the same church that I do. Didn't you hear last Sunday's sermon?
I can't believe you are saying that. Where did freedom of speech or the freedom to think and express diverse ideas go? Out the window?
There you go again, using the word diverse. You're missing the point. It's the agenda out there that's trying to indoctrinate kids. This isn't the country I grew up in. And I'll bet the next thing you're going to want our kids to read is stuff about LGBTQA and. Just give me a break.
But your daughter just came out. This is all beginning to sound like Nazi Germany.
How dare you accuse me of being a bad parent? And just because I disagree with you, you're comparing me to Hitler? That's not fair.
But it's a fact. You are so clueless. Can you just listen to reason for once?
Well, thank you, Suzanne and Karen. Now that we've heard this conversation, I'd like to ask all of you to think about what you just heard. What happened? How did it begin? How did it end? And remember, you'll be hearing another conversation later. But right now, we're going to be moving to talk about some basic principles that will hopefully help you bring your bold, difficult conversations to a reasonable, maybe even a positive place. Principle number 1, self-examine by honestly asking yourself whether in fact you have an agenda or you're trying to convince someone to change their point of view because after all, you are right. Principle number 2, be curious. Number 3, listen with an intent to understand. Principle number 4, you may very well react to what the other person is saying with confusion, anger, or frustration. That's normal. But principle number 5, remember, the point here is not to win the argument, but to increase awareness. And the awareness we're talking about here is a two-way street. The goal shouldn't only be to increase the awareness of the other person, but yours as well. In taking on these principles, we may benefit from the insights of psychology. Many of you may be aware of the concept of cognitive dissonance or bias and its impact on human communications. It's the discomfort and sense of instability we feel when we're presented with information, ideas, and perspectives that are unfamiliar or conflict with our beliefs, values, behaviors. From time immemorial, we have tended to protect against the unknown or unfamiliar by holding fast to our point of view or to the point of view of the group to which we feel allegiance. We may feel the urge to double down with a palpable sense of righteousness, to dismiss or reject new ideas. We may judge the person articulating a different point of view as just being plain wrong, stupid, tone deaf, and even bad, racist. After all, we know what the facts are. Another insight from the field of psychology is that we tend to attribute another's actions to their character or personality. That's attribution bias. But we don't use the same barometer for ourselves. Attribution bias says that we tend to cut ourselves a break while holding others 100% accountable. Like, if you're late, there's a good reason for it. If someone else is late, they're disorganized or lazy. Is that judgment accurate? Maybe, but maybe not. When you're stuck in a state of disagreement and each person seems entrenched in their position, it can be helpful to consciously walk through the three sides of the conflict. Number 1, how clearly did you articulate your position? Number 2, how fairly and thoroughly can you state the other side? 3, what lies outside of these two positions, and what other insights could be discovered by taking a broader perspective? As you can see, we have a lot of work to do, and it all starts with our principles. To self-examine, be curious, listen, and the point is to increase awareness and not to win. Now, to find out more about these principles, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa.
Thanks, Trish. So our first principle is to self-examine to determine if you have an agenda. As attribution bias says, we're always right. But based on other people's experiences, they may be right as well. So we bring up this wheel of privilege and power, not necessarily to talk about privilege and power in various positions, but to look at all the different aspects that a person can live through, the different lenses that they can see the world. And all of those lenses then lead themselves to have different experiences. And those experiences are maybe similar to yours, or they may be drastically different. The key to this is that all of those experiences, all of those different lenses can cause us to see things just our way, which then causes us to make other people want to see things our way as well. So stop and reflect. Are you just trying to win an argument because you're right? Or are you seeking to really understand what someone else is saying and come to an agreement or at least an understanding about the situation? With that, I'll turn principle number 2 over to Luna.
Thanks, Melissa. So, approaching conversations with curiosity. Research has shown that curiosity helps to strengthen relationships. It has a positive effect on developing interpersonal relationship, closeness. So, one study asked strangers to pose and answer personal question, a process scientists call reciprocal self-disclosure. They found that people were rated as warmer if they showed real curiosity in the exchange. This implies that demonstrating curiosity towards someone is a great way to build closeness with them and have a conversation. Curiosity also improves healthcare. Research has shown that when doctors communicate with their patients with genuine curiosity about their patients' perspectives, both doctors and patients report less frustrations and make better decisions. It ultimately increases awareness, the effectiveness of the treatment, and the communication. With that, I will turn it to Shaila.
Thank you so much. So I will now share some thoughts on listening with intent to understand. Listening with intent to understand is one of the most essential elements in dealing with conflict. So when we're engaged in a conversation, it's very easy to fall into a trap of simply waiting for our turn to speak rather than truly listening to understand the other person's point of view. So what this means is hearing the words spoken and understanding the emotions, perspectives, and needs behind those words. It's about giving the other person the space to express themselves without jumping to conclusions or interrupting. Of course, this requires a great deal of patience and openness, and we all know about that. Now, when we listen with intent, we can better identify and approach the root causes of conflicts with more empathy. So I, of course, encourage everyone, as everyone does, to pause before reacting and to pause to reflect on what the other person is saying. Better approach. So this kind of active listening creates an environment where individuals feel heard, respected, and valued. And who would not like that? So this is all essential for resolving conflicts constructively. Now I hand it over to Luna.
Thanks, Shaila. So during conversation, there may be frustrations. We work through it by taking a relaxed approach, and that helps with reasoning and understanding, and it can put people at ease. So starting a conversation with neutral questions. For example, for a topic, asking what is important to the other person? What is important to you? And then what is the common between both of you? Being aware of the surrounding also helps. For example, some topics it's good to discuss at home or in a social setting or in the community, but maybe not at workplace. And people also have different preferences for timing and other types for the conversation. So some may prefer a certain topic over dinner, may or may not. So choosing the timing and making mindful of the preference, both yours and the other person's, helps to have a better conversation. And with that, I will turn it to Eva.
Thank you, Lana. Hi, everyone. I'm Eva Habib, and I will be talking about accepting differences. As Audre Lorde said in Accepting Differences and Coping with Them, it is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. When we talk about accepting differences, we mean understanding and respecting those who are different from us, even when we disagree. This takes practice. It requires us to be patient and to learn to listen with open mind. Instead of tolerating and sidelining our differences, accept, embrace, and integrate those differences in our lives. Seek the positive aspects of diversity and learn from one another. As long as those beliefs and differences do not harm the world and the people around us. Remember, people's actions are often a reflection of their own struggles and backgrounds and the life they lived. When somebody reacts in a way you do not expect, try not to take it personally. It's about their life experience and the life they lived, not ours. It is rooted in their own experience and environment and family and friends. While I can control my reactions and responses, I cannot control how others react. As I said, it is the result of their package, of their life. Acceptance doesn't mean changing anybody's beliefs or culture or religion. Instead, it's about respecting and value those around us. Kindness is vital. And sometimes it's a key to resolving disagreements and conflicts and fostering open communication. When we show kindness, it comes back to us in positive, beautiful ways. It's important to acknowledge that acceptance is a two-way street. As I embrace your culture, beliefs, and background, I hope you will accept mine. This mutual spirit of collaboration and unity leads to a more peaceful community. Let us envision a world where everyone respects and values differences. In such a world, we would have healthier relationships, beautiful friendship, and a deeper understanding of one another. Thank you. I'm turning it to Sheila.
Thank you, Eva. So that was beautifully said. So the next thought that I'd like to share with you is making space for those different perspectives and for different practices. And we've heard so many examples so far. So another key aspect of resolving conflict is making that space for different practices and perspectives. Often we do not give others space to speak or even to be or participate. Our differences make us unique, and our many variations enrich both us and our communities. However, these very differences can also create some tension. If we don't acknowledge the differences, acknowledge and respect the multitude of cultures amongst us. And of course, we need to be non-judgmental, keeping in mind that everyone's background and experience has been different. So this means consciously creating an environment where all participants feel comfortable in expressing their views, especially those that differ from ours. Now, this could mean, how does this translate? This could mean allowing people to share their experiences or intentionally seeking out underrepresented voices and bringing them into a discussion. Often we go into a room and we see some people are just sitting aside quietly and not participating. So it's incumbent on us to bring them in. For instance, when we engage with people from different cultural backgrounds, we must be aware or become aware of the cultural norms and values that may shape their perspectives. And of course, we do that instinctively throughout our lives, whether it's at work or at home. We understand the differences of people and we adapt accordingly. I'm referring to how we deal with our own, say, two children who are so completely different, or siblings who are all different. You approach them differently. So creating space is very important. Creating space for these diverse voices and practices enriches our own understanding, and in so doing, promotes a more inclusive and respectful, healthy dialogue. Again, something which we all want and strive for. So now with that, I hand over to Trish.
Thank you, Shayla. And now, as promised, you're going to hear another conversation between Karen and Suzanne. As you listen, be thinking about how this conversation unfolds. How does it begin? How does it end? And what happens in between? Away you go, Karen and Suzanne.
Sorry. Hey, Sue, did you see that the school board is going to remove Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye and Patricia McCormick's book Soul from the library?
Yeah, I did. And I have to say that I agree with their decision.
Um, hmm, I'm surprised that you say that, but I'd appreciate your helping me understand it.
Well, thanks for giving it a try. I just feel that our kids are being exposed to too much too early, and that people who don't know our town's kids are trying to tell us what we have to do.
I think I see what you're saying, but what is too much exposure? And what is censorship or preventing our kids from thinking on their own?
I'm not talking about stopping our kids from reading books that they can really understand and use, but reading books that involve pornography or abuse may take it to seem as that kind of conduct is normal and acceptable.
But who is to say what is too much?
I know that's not easy, but when we're dealing with our kids, we have to draw a line somewhere. They're in the process of developing their own sexual identities, and frankly, I want to be the one who introduces our kids to that topic.
I know it seems like a different world out there. I feel it too. But once you start controlling what books our kids can and cannot read, we seem to be depriving them of the ability to learn and make choices. I kind of see what you're saying when you are talking about porno, but racism, its history and impact was part of the reason Toni Morrison's book was banned. If our kids don't learn about that and learn it early, we may be doomed to repeat this history.
You have a point. I guess I just want to make sure that history isn't taught too early or too graphically.
I have to admit that it's hard for me to think of when it would be too early to learn about racism.
Well, I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree, but you've made me think about all of this. It's more complex than I thought. We'll just have to talk again.
Back to me. This is Trish. Thank you, Suzanne and Karen. That was excellent. And to the audience, as you listen to this conversation, did you notice if one or the other conversation ended on a more positive, constructive note? Why? How might our 5 principles of having difficult, bold conversations have affected the outcome? Once again, as a reminder, these principles: self-examine, be curious, listen with an intent to understand. You may feel confusion, anger, frustration, which is normal. But most important, the point here is not to win the argument, but to increase awareness, yours as well. And to return to our primary, main point, don't just avoid these conversations. Take a pause, but give it a try. We hope our suggestions will help guide you along the way. And now to Tiffany.
Thanks, Trish. I appreciate it. So, for me, I want to speak directly to my sisters of AAUW. I really struggled with this particular webinar, and I think that the entire committee did. I've been on this committee for 2 years, and this was probably the hardest one for us to do. We really want to lean into the mission and to connect DEI to our mission. But in truth, and in full transparency and vulnerability, diversity is hard. It's extremely complex, and it incorporates almost every aspect of our lives. And, while we know the AAUW seeks to promote inclusion and equity and awareness for all of our members, intersectionality does come into play, and there are disparities that also plague many of us that are members of the organization. And so, in that spirit, we want to take that into consideration as well, that we all, based on what we were passionate about, brought that to the table in this particular webinar. However, I want to be honest in saying having bold conversations are hard. We have different lived experiences. We have diversity of thought outside of just representational diversity. If I'm Black and someone else is white or whatever it is, there's that difference that is true diversity. We're all different. And I think that that's the backbone of our organization. And for me, it's the reason why I joined AAUW, is because we are so different, that there were women that I knew could mentor me, and I in turn could mentor others. And I think that taking that with you as well, leaning into our mission, is now more important than ever. So take that with you, keep that in mind, that this is real life and it's not scripted. And although these scenarios are important and there are important takeaways, just know that we're living in real life, we're living in real time, and we're living real things. And so we're real people that are really struggling. So thank you for giving us this time and this platform. And I will hand it back off to Shyla.
Oh. Shyla, you're mute. We all do this. I'm sure many of you have done this before.
Yeah, I had my whole style out and everything, so that was good.
Right.
Now I can be myself.
Go.
So yes, so now I'm going to, what I've said previously was that bringing everything together, all the examples we heard, the theories, the principles, and so on, what it comes down to is how well we empower others to speak. When we empower others to speak, what happens is that we end up learning how to listen. So empowering others to speak is closely linked to listening. When we truly listening, we create that safe space that has been mentioned before for others to share their thoughts, concerns, ideas. And this empowerment fosters greater engagement and collaboration and understanding. One thought I like to also share is that most people are comfortable in who they already are because that's their lived life, that's what they know. What we are seeking and trying to extend is ourselves, listening, learning, embracing, teaching ourselves to be comfortable with those that are different from ourselves or have different perspectives. So empowering others isn't just about encouraging them to speak up, but showing that their voices matter, because that's one of the reasons why people may feel excluded. When we listen actively, we demonstrate respect for their perspectives, just as we heard in the second conversation. And that can inspire others to engage more fully in conversations. Now, this is especially important in DEI work, where historically marginalized voices have been silenced or ignored. And we know that there's a lot of noise going on around us on this. So our work is cut out for us. So by creating a culture where people feel heard and valued, we're more likely to foster the inclusivity, the trust, and mutual respect within our teams, our organizations, our branches, our communities, and we will build a stronger AAUW. We need to stay together, have those difficult conversations, and where they cannot be completed or where they cannot come to an agreement, they can still continue to talk. There's another time to talk as well, different settings to talk as well, and also to reflect on how much of what we're saying we have already experienced and we have already learned in how we handle our families, our work colleagues, and so on, that whom we deal with daily. And we do somehow find some commonality and we make it work. Thank you so much. With that, I hand over to Luna.
Thank you, Shaila. So people have agreements and disagreements. It takes time to process new information and or different information. Other factors also play a role in how a person processes information. Sometimes two people may communicate the same thing differently. So it takes time to understand each other. And some matters may require more than one conversation. So this is actually a continuing conversation. It is important to engage and have conversations. Having civil conversation helps both parties in the conversation. So you are helping yourself and the other, both parties are helping each other. And AAUW civility policy is a good resource. Check that out. And with that, I will turn it to Melissa to wrap this up.
Thanks so much, Luna. So as Tiffany stated, we did have some difficulties putting this together because we're so passionate about the topic, but we realize that our passion may not necessarily be your passion. And we're here to celebrate and support everyone in AAUW. So we're hoping that this webinar helped to highlight that it's good to be different. Those differences make us a stronger organization, but only when we can talk to each other and work through them and try to at least understand, not even necessarily agree, but understand where each other is coming from. So with that, I'd like to say that we understand that diversity sometimes has this negative connotation, especially now, but diversity is good. diversity of thought, diversity of experiences. And we want to celebrate that with our members. No one person, gender, ethnicity should be treated better than someone else. Our goal, as Tiffany said, and is in the AAUW mission, is equity, equity for all. So we are here as an equity or inclusion and equity committee to help us all talk better with each other and build a stronger AAUW together. So please continue to have those conversations, even if there are disagreements. We'd like to show you where you can find resources from this webinar and our past webinars on the AAUW website. So past webinars can be found here. It's not just the Inclusion and Equity Committee, but you can find a plethora of really useful, informative webinars on social justice, STEM work, advocacy, professional development, and other areas. Next slide, please. Now, if you're looking for what we presented tonight, as well as other information on things like intersectionality, which we had a couple comments on, please find those topics in the DEI toolkit, which you can access one of two ways. One is through the membership link on the very top of the homepage on AAUW. Next slide, please. Then you would go to governance and tools. Next slide. And then you would see the DEI toolkit. Next slide, please. The other way to do it is just to search for it. So use the magnifying glass tool. Next slide. Then you'll type in DEI toolkit. Next slide. From there, you'll see a wide range of topics that will take you to an overview plus some resources on that topic. Next slide. So in this toolkit, you can scroll. There's topics such as the dimensions of diversity, which then includes intersectionality. We give some ideas for diversity officers on how to determine how inclusive your organization is right now using a community agreement. You'll also see what we call plug and play programming. And in the plug and play programming is where you will find tonight's tools to include a whole playbook for facilitators and for organizations to explore having these bold conversations. Next slide. And again, this is where you would find tonight's webinar as well as others. Next slide. With that, we will open the rest of this time up for Q&A, but please email us at diversity@aauw.org. We would love to hear from you. Again, we are here for you, so please give us feedback and ideas of things that you would like to see and hear from your I&E committee. With that, Q&A is open. Also, if you can see the chat, and thanks, Carson and the AAUW team, the links for the webinars are in the chat as well. Most of us are teachers. If you have questions, we're here to answer. Yes, Nancy, we will make the slides available as well. Glad we can help with the email. Again, it's going to be diversity@aauw.org for anyone that needs it. We will open this question up with the new administration. Aren't we swimming upstream with DEI? I will say that AAUW stands on equity for all. So in talks with other women organizations, the women's coalition, a lot of different groups, our CEO believes that equity for all is still our valid mission, which we are standing firm on. part of equity for all is just acknowledging our differences so we can understand what then we need to do to enable equity. And then any other information on future webinars, future dates, we will send out through Membership Matters, and you'll have other signups. We're looking to do another webinar in late May, so everyone keep your eye out for that link, probably a couple weeks before it happens. If we are looking at the 5-star self-assessment, there is a criteria in there for diversity officers and diversity programming, equity program in the 5-star program. So I know there'll be a couple different changes coming out, I think. So be on the lookout, but there is criteria for diversity work in the 5-star program. Let's see, one of the comments, and I'll open this one up to the team for consideration. There was a program last week at one of the states on DEI, but one of the points made by the speaker was not to use the term DEI, but accomplish it through leadership. And I know we've had a lot of discussion on that one among us. So if any of you want to share your thoughts briefly, because I don't know if there's one right answer to this, but I think that's part of our struggle. So, so I know, Shyla, go right ahead.
Thank you. That's such an important question, and simply because of the environment we are in right now, it's such a critical time in history. But the important thing is that the words, we understand what DEI is, and we as AAUW are committed to equity. That's our mission, and that's what's going to stand. But what we also have to keep in mind is that regardless of what the labeling of the word is or the significance of diversity, equity, inclusion, if even that is changing, we're still going to be working on our mission and our purpose of advancing equity, gender equity, equity in all aspects of, education, health, all the areas that we have priorities. So I don't think we need to be deterred in that respect. Yes, it does feel a little bit harder to do the work, but our mission, our intent, our passion can still continue in the same way. The results is what we're looking for. Results, the goal, and working together, that can and will and should continue. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to jump in?
Oh, heck, I might as well jump in. My committee members know I usually jump in. It's a great question. I think with all genuine realizations about diversity and anything else, it's hard to accept something that's new. And sometimes it sounds like people are preaching at you, training you what you have to do. But just like the principles we're talking about, maybe there's something to that. Maybe if you could take away that they're training us, but rather, what are they trying to say? There may very well be instances where some words which we're used to, like I heard someone say you shouldn't use the word lady. Well, think about that. Engage in a conversation with someone about that. What could potentially be challenging, uncomfortable, or difficult with that word? Or why? We've been using it forever. But I think it's important to think about these things and realize some people focus more on reason and some people focus more on feeling, and all the other different approaches and life experiences through which people attempt to communicate. And that word or that phrase, life experience, again, I think sometimes people hear it and they go, it's important. It's really important. We do have different life experiences, and how rich it is to learn about those experiences, even if it's in this day and age, sometimes challenging to walk in. Open the door, walk in. Thanks.
Thanks, Trish. So we can move on because I see two hands raised, and I'm going to need both of you for this next question that's in the chat, which is what principle or principles have been the most challenging for you? And Ingrid would like quite a few of us to answer. So if we can go from Karen to Luna for that question, I think that'll be helpful.
Whoever asked that question, thank you. I was reflecting back. I think the challenging one for me still continues to be to listen with intent and to understand, because we know that people are coming from different places and not automatically make the decision that they're wrong or why are you even asking that? So that is a skill personally that I am still working on. So thank you for that question.
Luna, what principle or principles are most challenging for you?
Hi, so I just want to point out a few things before I go to that. Agreements and disagreements make things interesting. I want to know what we agree and disagree and why, because it helps me to understand the matter better. We have made such invention, we have discovered things because we agreed and disagreed, because we questioned. If you look at through the history of the humankind, things that we know today, things that we agree on today, we didn't agree, or some people, maybe not us, some people didn't agree. And that's what led people to find out what was it. We understood the world around us. We found new solutions. We found new products, build new products because we had agreements and disagreements. Disagreements help us to understand better, find solutions, explore more. So it's and again, I also have found out when people talk to each other, they are saying the same thing in different ways. So it may not be disagreement. It's it's hearing differently or not hearing completely. So each opportunity for conversation is an opportunity to understand each other, grow closer, find solutions. So having said that, the principle. So sometimes what is challenging is when people get too much tense or too much frustration. It's common to be, not understand and get frustrated, but we have to work through it. So, so that can be a challenging. But again, having this conversation, understanding, listening, as this panel showed us, and speaking, it's just listening, understanding, and also speaking so that the other person can understand. Sometimes again we say similar things but we don't understand because we are saying it differently. Sometimes and also the other thing I have found is very helpful is that when we come to a conversation, when we get out of it, we know more. Like one person knows this, the other person knows this. When we talk, we know more. So it has been, for me, it's always interesting and exciting to hear agreements and disagreements. And I have never, well, it has been difficult sometimes because we don't know a lot of things. We don't know what we don't know each other unless we talk to each other, right? I have to understand what is important to you so that I can present the important parts of that matter to you, right? So it is, again, it may be difficult, it may be easy, but is it's so much rewarding to have that conversation and not shy away. Thank you.
So who else wants to share one of these principles that's more difficult than others? One. Suzanne, Eva?
I think everybody really covered it all, but it's the main thing is not to shut anybody. Listen, because when you listen, you will learn. And when you learn, you will accept or not accept, but definitely you will widen your horizon. And people will get closer by that. I agree or disagree with you, but at least we will communicate, and communication is the most important thing. But I believe we covered a lot of things in this webinar.
The one thing I put in the chat that now we're getting a lot of questions about is, what is the diversity officer group? Suzanne, do you care to share what the diversity officer group is?
Sure. So the diversity officer group is members of the diversity. The diversity officers group are members of each branch or state who come together once a month, the second Tuesday at 7 p.m. To discuss issues regarding diversity and to get ideas, to share, frustrations, to let other people know what you're doing about diversity in your branch or state, and how we're handling diversity. So it's like our little club to support each other in the whole work of DEI. And I find every month we have a really good session because it's a safe place. So you get to talk about the things that are concerning to you. We've had this conversation about DEI and the word, and people are, concerned, should we still use it? And, all of those kinds of things. So we have really good, rich discussions in that group monthly. I know I did the conversations, but I also feel like we need to remember, I understand we talked about the principles, but I think one other thought I'm gonna convey is that we also need to understand that you can agree and disagree, but there are conversations that that you'll start to have with a person who isn't going to hear what you have to say, because we are in a time where listening and being able to agree to disagree is not what people are doing these days. So I want people to be careful and understand when you're in a conversation that isn't actually is supporting your view and you're not supporting their view, that maybe that's a conversation that needs to be halted. So let's not always think that everybody wants to hear what we have to say, because everybody may not. So I think you can tell when a conversation is not going to go the way you'd like it to, and you need to be able to remember to back off of that conversation and agree to disagree and walk away from it before it gets to a point where it's not safe or comfortable, because we're in a very dangerous climate right now. That's my personal opinion. I don't want to tell you not to have conversations, but know the conversations that you should have versus the ones that you shouldn't. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. I think we have time for one last question. We have one last question in the chat. And briefly, what does diversity mean? Because most people do tie it to ethnicity. So Trish, go right ahead.
Well, one thing I want to say, and this is an example of our committee and talking. I totally agree with Suzanne. There are some circumstances where, talking is just going nowhere. But I still urge you to take a breath, slow down, and perhaps attempt that conversation given our principles. Being genuinely curious, not just trying to say, boy, what you're saying is ridiculous. That isn't helpful. And, obviously these principles aren't going to last everywhere, but we do live, unfortunately, in a very divided environment. And it's through our efforts to speak that we will perhaps obtain the change that we want. But again, you got to start the conversation with, okay, self-examine, be curious, listen to understand, and don't just try to convince someone, but try to be aware of yourself and increase awareness of yourself and others. But Melissa, I think there was a question that I was, what does diversity mean?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Diversity means so much to me. I think until the last couple of years when I would have told you I thought I was pretty hip to all that, I was active in civil rights and all that, I was a good guy. I have learned so much about other cultures. I've been given opportunities to read books about histories that, did you realize that Mexico reached all the way up to Oregon? I mean, at one time, obviously, but all the people, the beauty of Asari, the beauty of Native American art. In other words, the beauty in a farm, the beauty in seeing someone survey their property. In other words, I think diversity, true diversity, is being open to those opportunities. And some of us are maybe not as young as we used to be. I guess I can cover my gray hair here. What an incredible opportunity we have been given, that someone started saying, wait a minute, there's stuff like white privilege out there. There's stuff like structural racism out there. Some people just, instantly go back, but what rich, interesting, fascinating concepts those are. So anyway, I think diversity is a great word and one we should embrace and enjoy.
I'd like to add something here, Mel. And what that is, yes, diversity is important, DEI is important, all of that is important, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we're all women together. We're people together, we're women together. We have all played the same roles in respect of being a daughter, being a mother, sister, all of those aunt, uncle. So people who go to work, have professions, have been through college. We have so much commonality that brings us together. Our personalities, our friends, our communities. So there is so much that brings us together. So when we come together with the AAUW hat on, or any organizational capacity, or in the community, if we function from that place, that we have like 90% of everything that we do and say we have in common. For example, people, if all of you were to see me, Trish mentioned, if you were to see me in a sari, you would be completely, taken aback. You would not know that I have that whole other personality. And in fact, in my room, if I open my closet, this room I'm sitting in, I have saris up galore. And And yeah, so it's, the cultural thing is an important part, but it's not something to divide us. So when people ask me, what did I do for Diwali, which is our most important holiday? Family came over, we gave each other presents, we bought new clothes, we cooked a lot of food, we made a lot of noise, we had a lot of fun. Can anyone else describe their holiday in any different terms than those? Because we're doing the same thing. What did you do at Thanksgiving? Family, friends, food, gifts. Christmas, we did the same thing. So we're all doing the same things in our own way. Perhaps the food is different, in which case, please invite me. I'd love to come and eat it. And you're welcome to my home. So the thing is, there is so much that we have in commonality that we should not allow the fact that we are collecting as an organization, to assembling as an organization, to make that such an important dividing factor, or, oh, how do I understand you? We understand each other. I mean, I serve at the UN, and many times I meet people who have no word of English, or I cannot find one of my common languages with them. We have great conversations. They talk in their language, I talk in mine, and we are communicating just fine. Why? Because we're speaking as from the heart, as people. So I think that's an important thing, and we all are kind. We are nice people. Let's bring the nice to the table. I'll stop there, Mel. Give the mic back to you.
No, all good. I think that we are winding down. I notice our participants we made this a little longer webinar than normal, but I think most folks are like, oh, it's typically an hour. We're done in an hour. So I want to thank all the panelists and the committee so much. Very proud of this team. And I think I'm very grateful for all of your expertise shared and your honesty and your true feelings shared with all of us tonight. So with that, hopefully everyone was able to get something out of this webinar that they could take back to their own organizations or their families and friends. Again, please use diversity at AAUW.org. We are here to help you, and we look forward to the next webinar.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, everyone listening and making time for us.
Yes.
Happy to answer questions. Eva has something to say.
Yes, I just want to say one thing. To be different and diversity is a good thing, is a very good thing. As long as I don't hurt you and you don't hurt me, and as long as we don't hurt the world and we don't hurt our earth that we want our kids to inherit. That's the most important thing.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Talk
Take
soon.
care.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shannon and Carson. We can't see them, but we know they're there.
And see you next time.